Hello, my name is Joe Aldridge, and I've been a type 1 diabetic for 7 decades.
And I'm Cam. I'm a type 2 diabetic, and you are tuned in to the Diabetes Our Way podcast, where we discuss all things diabetes related.
This podcast, we're going to share a few laughs, and you're also going to learn a lot as far as what we've experienced over our trials with type 1 and type 2 diabetes.
But please note, we are not doctors, and this podcast is for general information and entertainment. It is not any form of direct medical advice. If you or someone in your life has or may have any form of diabetes, please contact a medical professional. Hey guys, welcome to Diabetes Our Way with Joe. He's Joe. I'm Cam. We are absolutely thrilled to be launching this podcast. And I know, Joe, you've been working on this. You've been working on your life story of diabetes for quite some time. But this is going to be our first little intro podcast for everyone to get to know us a little bit and a little bit of our history. So Joe, why don't you tell us a little bit about, where did you get the idea to have this type of podcast?
Well, there's so much information out there, and I just thought, it might be good to not just look at the new stuff, but look at the old stuff. And I started back in the 1960s, and back then, they told me that my doctors told me my life expectancy was 25 years. And here I am 56 years later, and, and I'm still trudging through and battling the daily fight like we all do. And I think I've learned a lot of lessons, the good, bad, and ugly, that I think can help people.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I want to dive into when you first knew or realized that you were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So can you talk us through that? What were you feeling? How did you find out about it? The floor is yours.
Yeah, well, let's start. This is 1968, December of, 68. And basically, I'd had strep throat in the fall 3 times. And the first 2 times were not that bad. But then the third time, I had the urination, going to the bathroom all the time. I was losing weight. I was hungry, this and that and the other. And fortunately or unfortunately for me, my older sister, Cindy, who's actually Cameron's aunt, she was diagnosed as being diabetic at the age of 3. And so, my mom and dad kind of knew what was happening, but then, we had to go through the blood test and everything back then. And back then, it wasn't a little prick. They stuck a big needle in your arm. And then it took a while for them to figure out, okay, what's going on with your blood sugar and everything else. And so that was right around Christmas time. And, we got the call. And I remember my mom, Cameron's grandma, going into the bathroom and crying and just thinking, oh, my gosh, here I've got 2 kids that have got type 1 diabetes. And back in the 1960s, and even when my sister got it in the 50s, it was a tough road.
Mm-hmm. So what was going through your mind at that time when, you saw your mom, my grandma? Yes, full disclosure, we are related. Yeah. But what was going through your mind, when, your mother received that phone call?
Well, you're a kid. You don't know. I mean, kids just, that's a great thing about, children, is they just kind of accept things, and you just think, I'm going to fight it and this and that and the other. I didn't really know, what to expect and everything else. I just, just thought, I was sad to see my mom there, but I did say, she's crying. I just said, Mom, it'll be okay. And, fortunately for us, we were very devout Catholics back then and everything else. And you kind of, I think God has a plan. I don't think God, purposely wanted me to become diabetic, but I just think that, one of those things you were dealt. Even going back into the you had people that were back in the day, leopards and everything else, and
Right.
everybody's got crosses to bear. And as Cameron's grandma used to say, some people live hell on earth, some people live hell after earth. And so I don't know. I just felt like I was going to do the best I can. Fortunately for me, both my parents and my dad was just like grit your teeth and bear it, and my mom was just
The
like
old school way.
the old school. I'm very old school. Yeah, that's a good point, Cam.
So, when did you have some type of understanding of what diabetes was, knowing that your sister had it? Like, so I mean, were you adaptable because you had learned things already
Well, I
before?
saw things. I didn't really
Okay.
learn them, but my mom, back in those days, you didn't have an insulin pump. You didn't have, these real small needles and everything else. Believe it or not, we had glass syringes with long, almost I'd say inch needles that were steel, and we put those in a mason jar with alcohol so we could sterilize them after every use.
Oh wow.
So I saw, back then you would rotate getting your shots between either your butt and your legs or your arm. They didn't do them
Mhm.
in the stomach like some people do today.
Yeah.
But I saw, my sister having to get 3 to 4 shots a day, and my mom and dad having to do that. And so,
Mm.
yeah, it was it fun? No, but it was better than dying.
That's true. And, I think I remember you telling me what was the life expectancy rate with someone back then when they were diagnosed with diabetes? Like, can you say that one more time?
Yeah, it was about 25 years
Wow.
because we didn't have any testing. We had no Dexcoms, we had no Freestyle Libres, nothing like that. You went off the feel.
Mm.
So, and that was the old pork insulin. And so, only 70% of that insulin made by Eli Lilly, which is now made in China, is basically, was absorbed.
Mm.
And so, it's really interesting to look at when I have a low reaction, low blood sugar, how I felt back then versus how I feel today with the organic insulin and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it was basically, you went by feel, and
Hmm.
and fortunately for me, I had a great doctor, Dr. Stanley Bryan in Evansville, Indiana. I grew up in Tell City and Oldsboro. When I got diabetes, I was in Oldsboro, Kentucky, and but he was very ahead of his times. He basically said, "Joe, I want you to take less insulin, not more." And we ate a very low carb diet back then, and we can talk more about that, about what greens to eat, what not to eat, and stuff like that. Because what you put in your mouth, what you eat and drink in your mouth, drastically affects your diabetes blood sugar levels.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you know, you're going through this, as a young child. Um, were you afraid to like be a normal child? Did you think, oh, I can't do this, or I need to be cautious?
Yeah,
As most people are today. Anytime they have, a disease, I'm always hesitant to call diabetes, a disease, and I'm even more hesitant to call it a disability. And that's a whole nother topic
podcast.
we can cover, on that. Me from an HR perspective, when I'm looking at job applications and they list diabetes as a disability, well, I
Yeah.
don't think it is. But well, I digress. We'll talk about that one on another
Oh yeah.
podcast. Um, but were you afraid to live your life, I should say?
Well, that's a great point. But here I am, 63, 64 years of age. I'm still not normal. I mean, I
Mm,
was never normal growing up. I was just, I was just happy go lucky and stuff like that. But fortunately for me, I had parents that said you cannot use this as a crutch. I played every game. Other than football, my mom didn't want me to play football because she was worried that, I was going to injure my back or this and that and the other. But my dad said, this is great advice for, I think, parents and grandparents. Don't let you use that for an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be a victim. I was not going to be a victim of diabetes. I was going to say, no, I'm going to live life as best I can as long as I can. I mean, I think there's a song by Jimmy Buffett that says, I'd rather die while I'm living versus live while I'm dying.
Right.
And that was kind of the philosophy. But I thank my dad for that. And so many of my sporting events, I'd be having reactions and everything else, and there'd be my mom with orange juice or a candy bar and stuff like that. I mean, I'll chuckle. I mean, I was basically through a no hitter in Little League Baseball, and I was having a reaction and sweating. Just we wore wool uniforms back then,
Mm-hmm.
and I wore long sleeve shirts, and I was just sweating and having a reaction, and still did, and all I was doing was sitting there going, okay, I'm going to, eat this candy bar. And it's, I will say now to me, and I don't know, Cam, if you've had low blood sugars, I might let you talk about this, but to me, it's amazing when I have my blood sugar that's like 40, 50, even in the high 30s. There's this like phenomena that goes on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that I'm going into the next world or whatever, but it's amazing how vivid everything is in my mind and in my eye, my one good eye, as Cam will probably speak about too. The great thing is God has blessed me with an eye, and we'll talk more about this when I had eye surgery back in the 80s. But I'm blind in one eye and can't see out of the other, but I'm just glad I can see.
Mm-hmm. And
And
that's due to your diabetes, correct?
that's right. And
Yeah.
stupidity.
Yeah, for those who don't know, in what hypoglycemic is, the term when you're going low. I have been low before, and it is a scary. For me, when I first, had my first hypoglycemic, episode, I was freaking out. Of course, I didn't have anything in my fridge, which was also the other part that could really boost up my blood sugar. So I was hauling ass to the grocery store to go get something,
Yeah.
to raise it up. And that's one thing about these sensors, and we'll talk more about them, in a later podcast. But the advantages of these sensors, and I wouldn't say they're 100% accurate, but to give you a good gauge of where you're going and where you're heading.
Right.
For me, I got the shakes. I didn't get the sweats so much, but I got the shakes a lot, confusion,
Yeah.
kind of like, oh man, I need to do something or I'm gonna pass out. So
Well,
you know,
here's a
yeah.
couple things I would tell you. Drink skim milk. If you got skim milk or 2% milk, milk will actually raise your blood sugar very quickly.
Hmm.
Now, whole milk will not, but look at the carbs. But things that have carbs in it. So maybe in your fridge, you always keep a Coke. But the best thing to do is get like glucose tablets. You
Yeah.
can get those. You can actually get the liquid stuff too. That's very quickly. And
Yeah.
so
Well,
those are things. But yeah,
yeah.
you're right. It's when you're going down, you're going down.
Yeah.
And then the other
Did
thing I
you
was going to tell you
I
too.
I have a question though. Did you finish that no hitter?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah. And but here's the other thing too is there's a lot of people that are diabetic
Hmm.
and they have a low blood sugar and they're driving, and guess what? They get pulled over or they
Yeah.
have an accident. And the police officers, to no fault of their own, they think they're drunk
Right.
because it's almost like you're in a drunken stupor.
Mm-hmm. You
Yeah,
are.
yeah,
Because, from there it's kind of like fight or flight mode. Your
right.
body is like, I've got to do something, or this is not going to end well for me.
Yeah,
um, Speaking from my, as a type 2 diabetic, which is, I think, the great thing about our podcast is that you have the type 1, I have the type 2.
right.
um, when they first told me, probably, I don't know, God, 7 years ago, that I was a pre-diabetic,
Well, I think
you know,
everybody's pre-diabetic.
right? Well, yeah, like, they, if you say you weigh 140 pounds, you're pre-diabetic. What?
Yeah,
But for me, I didn't take it seriously. Should I have taken it so seriously? Because diabetes does run in the family. Probably. I should have. But, I was young. I was stupid. I was thinking, hell, I'm not going to get it, whatsoever. And then it got to a point where, started to go to my doctor regularly. And yeah, sure enough, I got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And even then, you would think that I was gonna like take it seriously, but it you would believe it or not, I really sometimes would forget that I'm a type 2 diabetic. I mean, that was just my attitude towards it. And maybe it's because I didn't, for me personally, I didn't take it as seriously because I hear all these things. Oh, you can reverse it. It can be all that. I am proud to say though today, I right now am got my type 2 diabetes well under control. It's almost what you would say is in remission right now. I
yeah,
haven't had to take any diabetes medicine for at least like over a month now.
great.
And it's been because I said, you need to get your ass in gear, otherwise, you know, something bad's going to happen to you,
Right,
and enough people tell you that, and enough people that you care and you love tell you, like, hey, you need to do something about it. They could tell you that all the world, but you're the one who's got to make that decision. And
right.
I made that decision, like, January, 270 pounds, probably the most unhealthiest of my life. I said, I've got to really start. I was taking probably, I mean, I was anything from 7 or 8 medicines, for various different things. But, my main things for diabetes, I was on the metformin, I was on the glipizide, I was on the Jardiance. Plus, I did like the, Mongeros and the Ozempics, and now I'm doing the Trulicity, which is been great. But I mean, you talk about those three big ones over there.
Right.
Hell, it's amazing I even got anything done. I probably went to the bathroom so much.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes back to what I was saying about, um, you just got to kind of monitor what you eat
Hmm.
and don't eat a lot of carbs, especially as a type 2 diabetic. And really got to get exercise. And the uh, as tough as it is, if you could only walk around the block once,
Hmm.
get and do it because walking can really help. I mean, I had a great doctor, and hopefully we'll have him on the podcast, Lee McKinley, and basically he said you have to become your own best doctor
Hmm.
because when you go in, your doctor's only looking at those numbers. But he's not looking now with the Libres and the Dexcoms and stuff like that. They can see your trends, and my worst trends like usually between 4 and 6 p.m. Because when I
Hmm.
come home, I kind of I usually have yogurt in the morning, maybe have a salad or something at lunch. And so and then I go, I went to the gym today, at about 2 o'clock and did 40 minutes of cardiovascular and stuff like that. And which I do about 3 to 4 times a week with some weightlifting and bands. But it's just, I get a little bit hungry when I come home and
Hmm.
stuff like that. And it's before we have dinner or whatever. But it's like, you have to manage this disease yourself. Don't count on the doctors are there to help you, just like a coach is there to help you be the quarterback, but you have to run your own plays and you have to figure out, how can we trudge through this? How do we go long? How do we do these things? and you've got to be your own doctor. And with the technology today, I think you really manage this disease a lot better than what I probably did back in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that with, you know, what was really the first big kind of change, growing up when it comes to technology and the medical advances with diabetes, specifically type 1?
Well, I'll go back to when I, got first diagnosed. I had to go in the hospital for about 3 weeks. Now they don't keep diabetics in there very long at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was in there and they were monitoring my blood, and they'd draw out, blood, big needle, 3 times a day. Then they would come back. And I can remember one time it was at lunch. I was having a reaction. I was sweating. And back then you peed in a cup, and they tested with like a stick or whatever, they tested your blood sugar from your urine, but that was what your blood sugar was 3 to 4 hours prior.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can remember eating, and they came in because my blood sugar was like 320. They came in and gave me insulin just to combat, to get my insulin lower or my blood sugar lower. And so that was the first start of it. Then all of a sudden they came out with what they call a glucometer, and you'll hear people talk about that on the television and stuff like that. That's where you prick your fingers and stuff like that. And to some degree, though, those are still very accurate. I still keep one just
Mm-hmm.
to check my Freestyle Libre.
I do as well,
Yeah,
because sometimes my Libre will tell me, "Oh, you're like 59," and I'm like, "But I feel fine." So
yeah,
that's when I just do my regular, glucose, prick of my finger, and it turns out, okay, yeah, I am fine,
yeah.
and because I don't think most people know, like with these, glucose meters, it's testing that, what do you call that, that fluid? Um,
Yeah, I'm not sharp on that, Cam, so I don't know the answer to that.
but in layman's terms, it's not actually measuring like your true blood sugar. And I think the real true tests of what your blood sugar is that actually do the finger prick.
Right.
And something does it to your psyche, when you see your trend going low, but then you get that reassurance when you do prick your finger and you're like,
Right.
okay, I'm
Yeah.
fine. I still battle with that, where it's like
Yeah.
I'm going low, but I feel fine. And I was like, God, I don't think I was, ever so high that I could never feel my hypo when I'm getting hypoglycemic.
Yeah.
I mean, the highest I ever got when I just wasn't really caring. Yeah, I was getting in the 300s, pretty
Yeah.
regularly.
Well,
Like,
here's the key thing. You want to try to consistently keep your blood sugar below 150,
mm-hmm,
because after 150, if your blood sugar stays at that level over a long period of time, that's where the damage comes through in your arteries and stuff like that. And, it starts to build up. And so, like for type 1 diabetics, it happens more in the eyes and the kidneys and stuff like that. With type 2 diabetics, it happens more in the legs. And so
right.
you'll see a lot of type 2 diabetics lose limbs, toes, legs, and stuff like that. Where type 1 diabetics, they might have more trouble with their eyes or with their kidneys and stuff like that. And so
Yeah.
I used to pray every night back then, please, please God, help me not lose my eyesight. Please not let me lose my kidneys, stuff like that. And so
Mm-hmm,
that was just one of those things that you kind of, have to make sure. And occasionally, especially when you're sick, or you've eaten a bunch of pasta or this and that and the other, and your sugar goes up, that's okay. But you just got to adjust the insulin. And for me, as a type 1 diabetic, I can take, for 1 unit of quick acting insulin, it reduces my blood sugar between 40 and 50 points.
mm-hmm.
Versus a lot of times with type 2 diabetics, it's a little bit different, especially if you're putting, metformin in or this and that and the other. It's your sugars can stay up there a little higher,
Mm-hmm.
and then, just you got to make sure that they don't stay up there. And I think that's a lot of people with type 2 diabetes, from what I've seen, is they just get used to living with a high blood sugar.
Yeah, I was getting there. I was just like, well, this is what it is. This I'm just going to keep taking this medicine, and like I had that epiphany. It was just like boom, I'm not going to, and I'm a pretty active guy. I used
Right.
to, play tennis in high school, do whatever, go to the gym, cycle.
Yeah.
But through the course of, leaving Charleston, going up to Greenville, I kind of lost my way, and I lost my healthy lifestyle. So I just got back into, you know, back in January. I was, like I said, I was 270, and now today I'm, 244. So, and that's
Yeah.
all because I started doing more research on, type 2 diabetes, what I can eat, how does workout affect my blood sugar levels, things of
Yeah.
that nature. Oh, I want to get some protein. Well, can I get, certain proteins, like what protein smoothies will affect, my blood sugar levels.
Right.
And I went more in I've taken more of an aggressive approach. I don't recommend it to people, but I've gone more in a caloric deficit where, I'm really limiting my calories from the
Yeah.
normal. Like if it's saying that, I supposed to be at like 3,000 calories, I will probably get it down. I've been getting it down to like 1,500 or 1,200 calories per day, right?
Right.
But that's me because I wanted to take a full approach. I said I'm tired of saying, hey, I'm a type 2 diabetic and this is how I'm going to be for the rest of my life. And,
Right.
I refuse to accept that because my doctor did tell me, he's like, if this doesn't get better, you're going to have to be on insulin. And I
Yeah.
said, the hell I am.
Yeah. 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 Well, sometimes I will tell you this, because the majority of people out there are type 2 diabetics.
Right.
I mean, the difference, and I don't know if people know this, but the difference, and because there's universities that teach us, and they think diabetes is all kind of the same, but type 1 diabetics, something attacks the pancreas. Like with my sister Cindy, Cameron's aunt, she got chicken pox, and then all of a sudden her pancreas stopped producing insulin. I had the strep throat 3 times, and after the third time, my pancreas stopped producing insulin. So with
Mm-hmm.
type 1 diabetics, your pancreas is basically done. With type 2 diabetics, your pancreas still produces insulin, but if you have weight gains and stuff like that, it just can't produce enough.
Right.
And that's where the sugars stay high. And so, to your earlier point, type 2 diabetics can be reversed, especially if people lose the weight and then, I applaud you for doing what you're doing because, it's, yeah, it's a real battle now. I mean, we'll
Mm.
talk about this in another podcast, but back in the 70s and 80s, I did not see very many overweight people. And we ate a lot of fats, we ate a lot of meat, we
Mm-hmm.
ate a lot of vegetables and fruits.
Well, I was going to ask you, did you eat the same things that all your other siblings ate, or did you get like a special different meal, or
My,
did you just?
yeah, that's a great point. So we ate every morning at 7 o'clock was breakfast. I had a snack at 10 o'clock. At 12 o'clock, I would come home from school. My mom would pick me up, and I had my meal there. And then if I played sports, which I played basketball and baseball and stuff like that, I'd have a little snack at 3 o'clock. Then at 5 to 6, 5:30, Dad would come home and then we'd have a meal. And then at 10 o'clock, or about not 10 o'clock, 8 o'clock, I would have an evening snack.
Mm-hmm.
So it was all weighed out. My mom, you know, here's the great thing about it is, and what I would tell everybody on this is that greens are good for you, all except peas. Peas are a starch, but I could eat unbelievable amounts of celery and it wouldn't raise my blood sugar.
Mm-hmm.
I could eat 15 grapes versus this much of a banana. I hate to this day I still don't eat bananas. but they would measure out, my mom would measure out my food. They would at the hospital. And as a young kid, as a teenager, you want to eat as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, my mom prepared the same food. So my brothers and sisters ate basically the same thing, but they could also eat a bunch of other stuff that I couldn't eat.
Right.
And like candy bars or back in the day, Little Debbie's and stuff like that. And,
Yeah.
and so, but I was fortunate, and my sister Cindy was fortunate, was as we grew up with a German Catholic mother and a Welsh Catholic dad that made it through the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
And so they knew what it was like not to eat very much. But my mom pretty much was a disciplinarian, studied everything. And with her and my doctor, Dr. Brian, I think they set the beginnings of saying, okay, what's good to eat and what's not bad, what's bad to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but it was hard, especially as I got where, all of a sudden you go to the movies and stuff like that. I couldn't drink a regular Coke or get a candy bar or whatever. I had to drink Tab or Fresca. And back then those suck. So it was all saccharine. But
Yeah.
that's one point I would tell you. If you're
Mm-hmm.
diabetic now, get off of Diet Coke, get off of
Mm-hmm.
Diet Pepsi, drink water or
Now,
drink,
why do you say that?
because Diet Coke will make you fatter. Once they changed it off of saccharin and they put it on the new thing, it makes people want to drink more and more of it. It's addictive. But
Mm-hmm.
there's something in there. This is like 15, 20 years ago when they did that. And that study was really interesting because they jacked up the rats with so much saccharin that basically they would say you'd have to drink about, this isn't the exact thing, but you'd have to drink like 30, 40, Cokes or Diet Cokes a day to, get the cancer and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. So to me, keep in mind, going back to Coca-Cola, when they first started, you know what Coca-Cola was made of, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Cocaine.
Yeah.
And so they wanted you to keep drinking more and more Coke. Well, Coca-Cola is a very profitable company, right? So is Pepsi.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but look it up. You can Google it and everything else. There's just a study that came out the last 2 weeks about how harmful Diet Coke is and what it leads to cancer.
Mm.
And so those are things you got to keep in mind. So once I stopped drinking Diet Coke and went more to water. And here's the other thing. I always laugh too when they came out with Splenda and all these kind of things. And this was back in the day. And of course, I'm sure my sisters and brother will listen to this and Cameron's dad. But we'd go home and we'd be at Thanksgiving and all of a sudden, they'd make this pie, pumpkin pie or coconut cream pie with Splenda in it or this and that and the other. It tasted like crap. And it made you go. It made you go to the bathroom, out the wrong end. And so my doctor finally said, if you're going to eat the real stuff, eat the real sugar, not the
Right.
processed sugar. Eat the real sugar. And so today I don't really eat sugar. I eat honey.
Mm-hmm.
So I eat naturally grown or made honey by bees, and that's what I put in my coffee, and that's what I put in as a sweetener.
Mm-hmm. Great.
So those
Yeah.
those are just some of those those things you learn over the years, and we can have more. If we have call-ins or emails or whatever, I can basically I learned by trial and error, and I failed a lot. But if my advice is stop drinking the diet sodas,
Right.
and just drink more water.
Speaking of emails, we do have an email account set up. So if you want to email the show, ask us any questions, or have any topics you'd like for us to, chat about, email the show at diabetesrway@gmail.com. We also have a YouTube page where our episodes are going to go on, and that's at Diabetes Our Way, and same thing with our an Instagram account. So we're hoping to grow this to be, very successful, but more importantly, just informative, and share, what we've gone through, what we've experienced. Now,
Yeah.
going back to your childhood, did you have your sister giving you pointers and teaching you things along the way as well?
Well, I mean, there was quite a bit of age difference there.
Mm-hmm.
Cindy, my brother Bill, your dad was 5 years older than me. Then there was my sister Becky, who was 3 years older there. And then Cindy was 3 years older. So what is that? There's 11 years age difference there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I probably, I would watch and learn. She to me was a hero. I also, one of my best friends got diabetes 3 days in 1968, 3 days before I did. Unfortunately, his name's Sam Malone, and he's no longer alive. And we could talk more about that as far as things that happened. But Sam and I, we got to experience a lot of the same stuff growing up. So there was three of us there, family friends and stuff like that, that we all kind of experienced that together, going back through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s and beyond.
Yeah,
And
and you
so,
mentioned you mentioned that you had to spend time in the hospital. Like, how frequent was that?
well, so I would have to go to the hospital in Evansville, Indiana, and which is about an hour drive from Tell City. But every Christmas, uh, the breaks of school, I would have to usually go and spend 2 to 3 weeks there. So I missed a lot of Christmases. I was in the hospital. I was in home at Christmas time and stuff like that. My parents would come down there and bring some gifts and stuff like that. So, um, you know, fortunately for me, and I would say this if you're able to, my doctor basically did not want me to wear pajamas uh, all day in the hospital. So he would make me get up in the morning. And back then, it was a Catholic hospital called St. Mary's in Evansville, Indiana. So at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, the priest would come with servers and give you Eucharist.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, then I was able to take Eucharist. I was, uh, you know, basically went through confirmation and everything. But so, as soon as I got up, breakfast is going to start in about an hour. So he made me take a shower, and then I would put on street clothes,
Mm-hmm.
and then I would eat breakfast, and then I would have to walk the stairs up and down, up and down. And if my parents came, we would walk. So he wanted me to emulate what it was going to be like after I got out. Because think about it, if I laid around all day and I'm not getting any exercise or normal walking, going to school, this and that and the other, my sugars are still going to be a mess when I got out because
Mm-hmm.
they were giving me too much insulin. That's why I have those low blood sugars. And
Gotcha.
so, fortunately for me, I'll never forget, we had a great janitor there. And at 10 o'clock, we had a pool room where we go down and shoot pool. And his name was Leroy. And, I'm sure Leroy's passed, but he would come to my room and say, hey, Joe, you want to go play pool? And so I'd go down there and shoot pool with him and stuff like that. And we'd talk about this and that and the other. And so I was, very active. And so I try to let clients know that, and you notice that now when people are in the hospital, let's say they have heart surgery, they have surgery or whatever, they want to get them up and moving immediately. And so you need to do that. You
Mm-hmm.
need, get up off your back if you can and keep moving and stuff like that. And you'd be shocked how well that helps your diabetes.
Oh
And,
yeah, absolutely.
and your point too earlier, Cameron, there's two parts to this. There's the physical part, but there's the mental part. And it's just like in religion, you know, there's the head and then there's the body.
Mm-hmm.
And and this is my belief. Christ is the head and we are the body. here on earth, and we both work together from that standpoint. And so if my mind or my head is out of whack, what do you think is going to happen with your body? What if you have that poor me syndrome and stuff
Mm,
like that? So the quicker you can snap your mind back into being positive, and I know that's a cliche word and everything else, but I always say it. It's almost like Rocky Balboa. You get the crap knocked out of you, beat down, and you say, "No, I'm going to get back up."
yeah.
We're all going to get knocked down. All us diabetics, all this cancer, all this heart, everybody's going to get knocked down. It doesn't matter if you get knocked down. What matters is what happens after you get knocked down. Are you going to
Yeah.
get back up?
I think I started to get really frustrated when, I'm doing everything right, eating right, going to the gym, uh, you know, just, losing weight. And then I'm like, man, why does my blood sugar drop so low at night? And I started to get really, really frustrated with it. And, that's when I finally just started to say, well, either the sensor's bad or, something's wrong with me, because
Yeah.
it was frustrating at that point. You're like, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Why am I going so low now? Like, why can't I stay in the green? And that's when I said, okay, I need to actually get a finger prick glucose monitor to really test it out, which has really made me more secure in where I'm at, because it's when you're working out, yes, I mean your blood sugar will drop because
Right.
it's you're using, as a type 2 diabetic, that's the first thing, it's going to use. It's going to use all that stored,
Yeah.
glucose that you've
Yeah.
had,
Glucose.
because
Yeah.
when you're working out and you're, weightlifting and things like that, that's the first thing it's going to go to. And they
Yeah.
normally say that it takes about 24 to 48 hours for those to kind of get stored back up again. And you're like, well, hell, if I'm working out every single day, what's,
Well,
but,
let me say this. Look at that as a good thing.
yeah.
Rather your blood sugar go low and adjust your insulin or
Hmm.
adjust what your medication is to less, or would rather your blood sugar go high?
Yeah,
Well,
that's
actually, in
true.
reality, think about that. That's actually a good thing because you're moving in the right direction. You're not moving in the wrong direction because you can adjust what you're doing, and then and maybe you don't start taking the insulin as much, or need to. Maybe you just need to eat a little more. And so
Yeah,
it's
that's
a
also, I
game.
found out also too. It's
Yeah.
like if I actually had a little hypoglycemic event yesterday because I didn't eat enough, and I skipped a meal, and like I found out I cannot skip meals.
Yeah.
Like, for me personally, now I know it works for certain people and they fast and it's great. I've
Right.
actually, I've listened to quite a few people who say that heck, they can be fine in the 60s or the 50s,
I
as their
can.
blood sugar levels,
I,
and they
I
don't feel it. And that's another thing. It's like, when do we decide that, 70 is, that's the right target area, 70 to, up to the 130 or the 150 is the
yeah.
right
My
zone.
my normal range is 90 to 120,
Mm-hmm.
and so but I don't mind it when it's in the 70. And like I said, I feel like I'm mentally sharper
Mm-hmm.
when I'm a little bit low from that standpoint. Now I've got sugar tablets with me and stuff like that, but it's um, whether it's right or wrong, I don't know, but I've adapted to it and
Right.
stuff like that, and so that I think that's the key thing is going back to that quarterback and that coach analysis and everything else. Everybody on this podcast, your story is completely different than Cam's story, my story. It's your story. You have to be your own quarterback, your own coach, and you have to figure out your body. And the great thing about the technology today is that you can do that. Yeah. Do I still hope there's going to be a cure? Yeah, I do. But do I believe the pharmaceuticals want there to be a cure? That's another story. But here's the key thing: you've got the technology today where I think you can play the game and not be a loser of a team, but be a winner of a team.
Yeah. Well, my doctor, the last time I spoke with him, and I said, hey, I haven't had to take any of my medicine for a month. They are linked up with my sensor,
Yeah,
so they can see
that's
what my
great, isn't it?
levels are. Oh, it's
Yeah,
amazing.
I
It's
know.
great.
It's yeah,
I'm actually linked up with my dad too, so I can see his and he can see mine. And if I ever get too low, they just call me and they're like, "Are you all right?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good. I think so. I think
but
maybe that was a compression low, because you get those too. Like I love to sleep on my side, right?
yeah,
So you can get those compression lows where it's
yeah,
actually not accurate.
yeah. Do
But
you have your Libre in your arm?
yeah, I actually have it. I've got it right here. Can't see it because I've got a little
Yeah,
sleep, but I've got it right here. I actually switched. I used to have it on this arm, but I love to sleep on this side a lot, and I didn't feel like I was getting the most accurate readings on this arm, so I switched it. Hang on, you show my guns there.
yeah, yeah.
I actually switched it to this arms, and I feel like I've gotten more accurate readings, and plus I don't sleep on that side as much.
So you
And
sleep on your left side, right?
yeah,
That's better for your digestive system.
yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
yeah. So
I've
it's
seen some
amazing.
people though. I've seen some people put it on their chest and things like that, and I'm like, I don't know how accurate that
Yeah,
is. I've never tested it.
yeah.
Maybe I'll test it one day.
I've always had my on my right arm and
Yeah.
stuff like that,
I mean, they're like, "Oh, you should put it on the fatty part." And I'm like, "Well, I'm lifting right now, so I'm trying not to have any fat
Yeah.
on these arms." But
But no, that's great points. From what you're saying there and stuff like that. It's just, but it's like you're figuring it out.
yeah,
You
and
know,
that's
it's
it's. I mean, I'm 40 now, right? So I mean, I'm still young. Don't get me wrong, but my mindset has definitely changed. Of
right.
this having type 2 than it was when even like five a couple years ago,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah, I
Um,
remember when you and I talked about 5, 6 years ago, and you were saying all this stuff, and and I was just like, well, just keep trying to do what you're doing, exercising and stuff like that. But
yeah, I'd be calling you
but
when I was in the grocery store. I'm like, hey, can I eat this?
yeah, well, it's interesting. I went to the grocery store today.
It's tough, man. It is tough.
Well, so I'll tell you what.
They should just open up a diabetes grocery store just for
Yeah.
diabetics.
Well,
Oh wait, I think those are called health stores, right?
yeah,
Like
a
your
lot
Earth
of
Fare.
lot of really good stuff though you can eat that will fill you up and not raise your blood sugars. But anything green, I think is good, other than peas. But peas are still good. I love peas,
Hmm.
especially a little bit of butter, and and I know it's a little bit more expensive, but try to buy the most natural stuff you can. There's
Yeah,
a there's a there's an app called Yuka, Yuka, and you can hit the scanner thing, and it will tell you whether that is a good product or a bad product, whether it has toxic stuff in it, stuff like that. So I use that a lot, and I got it from a friend of mine who's a urologist and stuff like that. But it was made in Japan.
and you said it's called Yucca.
Yeah, Yuka.
Okay.
And people, it's funny when I go to Fresh Time or go to the grocery store, they probably think, Fresh Time probably thinks I'm there from Kroger, scanning their prices and everything else and stuff like that. But it's really good. But, I try to eat a lot of avocados.
Hmm.
I try to eat, and your Uncle Don will like this, but try to eat a lot of fish, a lot of salmon,
Yep.
tomatoes. Tomatoes are good for you, especially for your arteries and stuff like that. Um, I picked up eating more walnuts, from that standpoint, and then basically some of the other stuff. There's good things that you can eat to kind of lower your sugars, but also too I think improve the other parts of your body functions and stuff like that. Your digestive kefir's good,
Yeah.
you know,
Like
and
for me, like I've got a lot of fruits and vegetables in my fridge now. I've got
blueberries.
I got blueberries, I got
Yeah,
strawberries. I've got some of the other things like in case, I do need like a little bit of a jolt, to like grapes,
right.
pears, plums. Um, I mostly what I do, I've started meal prepping now, which is
Yeah,
I think has been great for me because, I'll buy a whole thing of chicken, I'll cut it up in little pieces, I'll cook it, and then I'll do like some plain white rice, right? And then I've started actually, no, I'm not saying that everyone has to get this extreme with it, but I've started to measure out my stuff, and put it in individual containers.
Grandma Aldridge. How much bacon you eating? Because
I don't eat,
can we bring
not,
up your old nickname under Grandma Aldridge?
yeah,
Cameron was the bacon
I,
boy.
I still love bacon to this day. I will not refuse bacon if it's put in front of me. But I've actually tried, turkey bacon
Yeah,
too,
turkey
which
bacon's not
is,
bad.
pretty good as well. So people are like, it's once you start doing it, right?
Yeah,
It takes discipline, but then turns into a lifestyle,
yeah,
and for me, reversing my type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle choice that I wanted to make and I
yeah.
wanted to choose to make. Do you remember? I want to go back to your childhood real quick. Do you remember the first time you had to inject yourself without any assistance with insulin?
Uh, yeah, let me, it was funny you said that about the uh, meal prepping and stuff like that. I think a lot of people, let me make this comment and make sure I come back to what your question was. Um, there's also an app
Mm-hmm.
called Calorie King, and it has all the restaurants and what they have. So if you, let's say you go to Wendy's and get a single cheeseburger, it will tell you how much carbohydrates
Yeah.
you are in there, and then you can adjust your insulin intake according to what that Calorie King is. And
Mm-hmm.
so there are certain apps
I
going along
use
with
yeah,
technology.
I use MyFitnessPal is one of
Yeah,
my apps that I use where I can log my food. It tells me, my calories, how much fat, how much carbohydrates,
yeah,
how much protein, I've consumed in the day. You can put in, hey, how much weight do you want to lose? And it'll tell you, okay, you need to eat this many calories in order to get to your target
yeah,
weight. So I'm very pro, these apps. Now, do
yeah.
I do it on a
Especially
daily
for the
basis? I
yeah,
try to,
yeah,
but there's some days where I just forget, and
yeah,
but I know like I'm okay. I'm gonna eat the same thing,
yeah,
again and stuff like that. And I think my fear is like when I veer off, and I'm not afraid of it too much. It's like, well, if I have this, what is this gonna? And I think it's all kind of trial by error,
it
right?
is.
You
It is.
try things and you say, well, how does this affect my blood sugar? It's like,
Right.
um, well, gosh, I ate this. I haven't eaten that for a while. Now, hell, my blood sugar is now up to like 190, or
Yeah.
something like when it normally is
Well,
that.
one of the worst things to eat, especially for younger people,
What's that?
pizza.
I love pizza. I haven't
Yeah, I
had
know,
pizza in
but
a while.
the bread in the
Yeah.
pizza, McDonald's French fries are not good either
Well,
because
is any fast food good for you?
well, no, but I mean there's something that's in there that the especially like the crust in pizza. I'll go to bed and if my blood sugar, let's say, would be 120, I wake up and my blood sugar is 340, and it's
Mm,
something that's in that crust that is that will really screw with your blood sugar. Now, maybe that's not true for everybody, but it was for me. So I don't eat pizza hardly anymore. We eat flatbread, artesian flatbread, and then we just, it's real skinny, and I can eat that, and it doesn't raise my blood sugar at all. We'll put on
yeah.
some tomatoes, and a little bit of cheese and maybe turkey pepperoni, stuff like that, and then have a salad.
Yeah. Have you tried that cauliflower pizza?
Yeah, I don't like it.
Fair
Yeah,
enough.
I'd rather just have cauliflower with some salt and pepper.
Right.
But but yeah, back to your point, it was fortunately for me, we had parents, and your parents and everything else, they love their kids. And so my mom would usually give me my shots,
Mm-hmm.
but then, I had to do that starting in high school. But then when I went to college, yeah, it was definitely on me and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But then when I went to college, we actually had the plastic needles and stuff like that. You didn't have to, have the needles in the refrigerator in alcohol. So
Okay. Yeah.
that's my husky Arlo.
Okay.
So, but
Yeah, well, I think too, spending all that time, with your parents, and then being in the hospital. And I know you said like, oh, you couldn't stay in your pajamas, you had to get, dressed. I think that was actually kind of teaching you to be on your own, right?
right,
If I have to look at that, full circle. But gosh, I mean, I'm blessed. Like, I've never had to, take insulin, before.
yeah,
I mean, the closest thing I do to a shot is I'll do like the Trulicity, and I'll shoot it in my stomach. I
right.
remember, I remember my other grandpa, Grandpa Sierra. I used to watch him, and he was diabetic as well. And I used to watch him, take shots in his stomach, and I always was like, oh,
I never, I
I
don't,
couldn't do
I
that.
stop. I don't do shots in the stomach.
Yeah.
Mine's usually in my right arm or my butt. And it's,
Okay.
it's pretty good when you can go back behind you and shoot yourself in the butt.
Yeah, you
And so,
good range of motion.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's just one of those things. I mean, you adapt.
Yeah.
I look at people that, um, you know, maybe let's say they lose a hand, they lose a leg, and stuff like that. Look at a three-legged dog,
Hmm.
and the three-legged dog can still manage to get around and stuff like that. And so the human body, to me, I think God is just, we're basically supposed to treat our body as a temple, and I for sure I've not done that,
Hmm.
but I just think the human body to me is amazing. And here's the thing about diabetes, and Lee McKinley told me this. He calculated for me how much insulin I need to take a day, based upon my weight and stuff like that. And he basically said, you shouldn't take more than 38 units a day based upon this. And so you got to design your food to make sure you're not taking 38 units of long acting and fast acting insulin. And so if you can find a doctor that can do that, please do that, because that will really help you figure out what you can eat and what you can't eat based upon what you're taking. And then my endocrinologist, and Lee McKinley, they basically said, okay, for every eight carbs, I need to take 1 unit of insulin. And so,
Hmm.
so if you calculate that, taking 38 units, this and that and the other, that tells you pretty much how many carbs you can eat, from that standpoint. But I eat a lot less than that.
Yeah. I would
And
encourage anybody, like, if you get diagnosed, at least from a type 2, diabetic standpoint, is to really get with a nutritionist,
yeah,
and have them help you with that.
yeah,
It gives you a good base, and even have like specialty doctors. Like, I mean, I'm blessed. My primary care doctor, he does great. When it comes to my type 2 diabetes, and gives me great insights and things like that. But a nutritionist, I think, is super beneficial. Also, always get your yearly, diabetic eye exam too.
right,
So, very, very important as well.
right, yeah. Well, the one thing I always kind of, you got to make sure you like the person that's treating you.
Hmm.
And I chuckle. I'll never forget. I went into one person that wanted me to do all this, do all that, and was like, and she said, "Well, if I was diabetic, I would be on this, that, and this and that and the other." And I said, "Well, here's a key thing. You said a great word." And she goes, "Well, what's that?" And I said, "If you are diabetic, you're not diabetic. I'm diabetic. I've had diabetes longer than you've been alive."
Hmm.
And she wasn't my doctor. I decided I'm going somewhere else.
Right.
And so, I know it's tough now getting into doctors and everything else, but if you don't like your doctor, then it's not going to be a fun experience going to see your doctor.
Yeah.
So,
And I would also add though, with everything that's available, in today's technology, there's really no excuse not to, try to better your life.
right. No, I agree totally. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. So, well, what do you think? Should we shut it down for tonight?
I think so. I think this was a great first podcast for us, and like I said, we just wanted to get kind of a good base, of kind of our stories, and obviously there's more to get into. But yes, feel free, email the podcast diabetesrway@gmail.com. Give us a follow on Instagram, Diabetes Our Way. Also on YouTube, Diabetes Our Way. Like and subscribe. Trying to try and get a lot of subscribers. We love to hear from the audience. Any feedback is good feedback. I say. So love to hear from you. Love
Yeah.
to hear any type of topics you want us to talk about, or heck, we might even do like a Q&A question.
Right.
So but
Well,
again, we're not doctors, so we're
yeah.
just talking from experience.
Well, and what I would say, especially if you're a parent and you've got a child, there's a lot of stuff we can talk about there. If you're pre-diabetic, especially with Cam, we can give you some advice there. Not medical advice, but just exactly what we went through and what we experienced. If you're a type 1, you're a type 2, I think this could be very beneficial, because my thoughts are, Cam, is that there's a lot of stuff out there, but it comes more from the medical standpoint, not from the actual life experience standpoint. And you can research all the other diabetic podcasts, but having like I said, been diabetic for 56 plus years now, I think I can share with a lot of stuff as far as what I've learned, and going back to the good, bad, and ugly, what I've learned over the years. And don't get me wrong, I made a lot of mistakes and still make mistakes, but I really feel like we can share our experiences and really help people.
Absolutely, and we want to get some guests on the show too to talk about
Yep.
their experiences as well.
Yep.
But well, Joe, this has been great,
Yep.
and we're gonna try to get these. Your husky agrees too.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna try to get these out. Try to record once a week, get these out, and yeah, just follow us again. Diabetes Our Way, YouTube, Instagram, and email the podcast
Yeah.
diabetesrway@gmail.com.
Yeah. Please
So
follow us. And yeah, we got a lot of avenues, and it's so exciting to, to do this with my nephew,
mhm,
and we'll get it out, and stuff, to, on LinkedIn, Facebook, and stuff like that too, so people can follow. So,
absolutely,
I
absolutely.
can.
All right, well, guys, have a great night, day, wherever, however you're listening to, and you got this.
Have you checked your blood sugar?
Oh yeah, hang on, we forgot to do that. Let's do a blood sugar check real quick. I am sitting at 98 right now.
I'm sitting at 118.
There we go.
But you see, I had a big spike there when I came home. That's what I like about the Libres. But
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we'll probably start doing it at the beginning or the ending of each show, just kind of seeing where we're at. Feel free, if you're on a sensor as well, check along with us.
yeah. All right, Cam.
All right, guys. All right, Joe.
Okay, love you, and hey, live well, and you can do it with diabetes. And we wish you all the best, and have a great evening and a great day.
All right. Catch you next time, guys.
All right.